It is now my great honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Jane Tillman from the Austin Riggs Center to introduce our panel discussion.
Thank you, Kelly, and welcome, and thank you to coming to this community event today. And I want to thank all of the many people who have worked to create this event, to Ken Burns and his colleagues for making the short version of the documentary Hiding in Plain Sight available for our viewing. That was very moving. I encourage you to see the whole 4-hour production that aired on PBS in June. It's really just a tremendous educational piece for all of us at this time. I also want to thank Ali Borowski for the Finding Your Anchor boxes that are available today. You should have all received a box, and there may be some left over for you to take for yourself or for someone you think might benefit from having one. And of course to Kate Morris and colleagues for the public service announcement that we just viewed today. And I want to thank all the co-sponsors of the event as well. We're fortunate to have with us today participants with a breadth of experience addressing youth mental health and suicide prevention for a roundtable discussion, which we're going to have in just a minute. I'm going to introduce the participants, and I'll moderate a discussion that will end today at 4:30. After the discussion, you'll find representatives from the Berkshire Coalition for Suicide Prevention in the lobby, along with staff from the Austin Riggs Center, providing some educational resources and materials to you about youth mental health and suicide prevention in our local community. Yesterday was International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day. It's always held in this country on the Saturday before Thanksgiving. Congress has recognized this day of recognition. It's a time when people affected by suicide loss can gather to find comfort and share stories of healing and hope. And today is Transgender Day of Remembrance, which honors the memory of those murdered in acts of anti-transgender violence. And that's recognized every year annually on November 20th. This year in the United States, we remember 32 lives lost because of transgender violence in the past year. And we remember, especially today, those killed last night in the LGBTQ nightclub shooting in Colorado Springs. So we have a lot of mourning and loss that goes on in our midst, and we wanted to take a minute just to acknowledge that. Now I want to invite my panelists to come up on the stage, and we will begin a discussion. I'm going to come down here to the end and have a seat, grab a mic, and I will introduce you. I want to introduce Dr. Brenda Butler. Dr. Butler is a board-certified general child and adolescent psychiatrist at the Berkshire Medical Center and the Breen Center. She's the medical director of child and adolescent psychiatry and the training director for Berkshire Medical Center's psychiatry residency. In 2015, Dr. Butler was the recipient of a Massachusetts Department of Public Health and SAMHSA grant dedicated to the prevention of suicide in youth. That grant lasted until 2021 and resulted in the implementation of system-wide best practices in suicide prevention at Berkshire Medical Center. At the conclusion of the grant, lose this mask here. At the conclusion of the grant, she recognized the continued need to support youth in our community. And so Dr. Butler has advocated within our healthcare system to start an intensive outpatient program for youth. Dr. Butler's deeply committed to improving the lives of children in the Berkshires and beyond. We're also so lucky to have with us today Eric Ewers, who's worked with documentary filmmaker Ken Burns for more than 33 years on almost all of Ken's single and multi-episodic films. He currently serves as a co-director and senior editor of Florentine Films, Ewers Brother Productions, a preferred collaborative company in the co-creation of Ken Burns films. Eric has been nominated for 10 personal and program Emmy Awards and has been awarded 1 editing Emmy and 3 program Emmys, as well as 2 prestigious American Cinema Editing or ACE Award nominations and won Ace Eddie Award for Best Edited Documentary of 2015. Eric is an expert in all aspects of filmmaking, having served as music producer, writer, director, film producer, picture editor, and sound effects, music, and dialogue editor. In 2015, he served as co-producer and co-director and editor. Eric and his team created the 2-hour PBS film, The Mayo Clinic, Faith, Hope, and Science. And then, of course, in 2022, the miniseries we've just seen a portion of, Hiding in Plain Sight, Youth Mental Illness. To my immediate right is Dr. Katie Lewis. She's the Director of Research at the Austin Riggs Center, and her research examines the role of interpersonal relationships as both a source of risk and protection against suicidal ideation in both psychiatric populations and in the general public. Dr. Lewis received a doctorate in clinical psychology from the Brooklyn campus of Long Island University. She served on numerous editorial boards, numerous scientific publications, and her research has been supported by the Robert Wallerstein Fellowship in Psychoanalytic Research. She's received grants from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention and the National Institutes of Mental Health. She currently serves as consulting editor and section editor for the Journal of Personality Assessment. And finally, at the very end, I want to welcome straight off the plane from Southern California, Ali Borowski, who flew in this morning from Southern California. She's the founder and CEO of Find Your Anchor, the creator of the boxes that you now have, thanks to Ali. Find Your Anchor is a grassroots movement aimed at suicide prevention and awareness, which has been praised by Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation, the American Association of Suicidology, Graphic Design USA, and Jeff, her downstairs neighbor. She's an experienced graphic designer who made a name for herself in Chicago as a design lead for the NHL Winter Classic and Stadium Series before fleeing the winter for Southern California. Armed to the teeth with pens, sketchbooks, and kazoos, she lives and breathes good fonts, big waves, long walks down art store aisles. For years, Ali has enjoyed playing outside center on the rugby pitch and often drives across country for games, carnivals, and sometimes just because the wind is blowing. So we're glad to have you here today, and I'll start with you, Ali. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Find Your Anchor and your creation of this not-for-profit foundation aimed at suicide prevention.
Thank you so much, Jane. First of all, it's an honor to be here. What a beautiful space, what beautiful people, and I cannot thank you all enough for showing up. One of those bios was not like the other, I felt like, so it truly is an honor to be sitting with all of you. Each of you may have gotten a Find Your Anchor box. This is really at the core of Find Your Anchor, these little blue boxes that we launch and send into the world. I don't know if you've had a chance to go through it yet, but there's a whole bunch of good vibes and resources. And really, I created it out of my own journey. I survived multiple suicide attempts, and it was really navigating the mental health world felt incredibly corporate and clinical and cold. I felt like kind of just a barcode being shuffled through a system. And the first time I was hospitalized was in 8th grade, and the last time I was hospitalized was when I was 26. So I've known this dance well, and everything that I encountered just felt so sterile. And I thought, where's the color in every sense of the word in mental health? And I really felt this lack of human connection. So I thought, I'm a graphic designer. I'm going to create what I wish I would have had. And it really just started out as my own way of healing and putting that love into the world and filling my own soul has evolved into 48,000 boxes, which we've sent to 48,000 people. And what's really incredible is the boxes take on a life of its own, pun intended, where when you're in a better space, you add things to the box, things that helped you, things that fueled you, and then when you're in a better spot, launching it and paying it forward to someone else in need, and just having that tangible resource to help and support others. And that's how we define anchors really as the little things in life that bring you joy. They really don't have to be groundbreaking. Some of my favorite anchors are steak tacos, lazy Sundays, a vanilla chai latte, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, one of my personal favorites. And it's just things to get you through another night or another minute when you're struggling. You know, if I'm having a bad day, I want to come home, lay on the sofa, order Chinese food, and watch Sister Act 2. You know, certainly not groundbreaking, and it's not fixing all of my problems, but it's something that brings me joy. It makes me feel good, and it's stringing those moments of joy along. And that's really what we're about with Find Your Anchor.
Thank you very much, Allie. And you had suggested that the panelists up here maybe share. You had hoped panelists would share maybe what an anchor might be for the panelists. So I thought I would share that I find my work incredibly meaningful, and the relationships I have with people, my friends' relationship, and my spiritual life and my religious life is an anchor for me. So I don't know if other panelists want to share something about that.
Sure, I'd appreciated talking to Allie about this too, and probably Home Alone, Lost in New York would also make it up there for me. I think also, my family, my husband, my 2 daughters are, and my father who's in the audience here too, just wonderful anchors for me. My work, having wonderful colleagues who sort of share the same passion for trying to make a difference and trying to learn and improve the world. Those would be my primary anchors, I think.
Well, I thank you, Allie. I would have to echo the work and colleagues and family and friends, my mission to try to make a difference in children's lives, and my garden. My garden is an anchor. I love to get out there to weed, to plant vegetables and flowers and just be in the outdoors. I like being outdoors here in the Berkshires and all seasons. It's incredible. So I think those are my primary anchors. I took up skiing when I moved here too. That's pretty good. I sit on a chairlift and I look around. It's extraordinary.
Mine would be wine. I do love wine. Obviously, family is always critical when you have my wife, Sue, who supports me, and my 2 daughters. My daughter gave me a Father's Day card last Father's Day, and I had, while making this film, which I'll explain later, was some of the hardest years of my life in my mental health journey, and she wrote in the card that she showed me that older people can change and can redefine themselves and become self-aware, and she said I was her role model. So there's no better anchor than that.
So, Eric, when we met in the lobby, you told me you've been on the road since June 2nd. That this film, you said usually when you make a film, that's it. It's years in the making, and then the film comes out and it's over. And this film is different. It is the beginning of something. Now that it is out, it's the beginning of a national conversation that you are very active, and you have events scheduled all over the country. And so the film is a mission in some way. I wonder if you could say something about that.
Sure. People often ask me why mental health. The simple answer is Ken told me that that's the next film he wants me to make. So there's a very undramatic answer, and I don't want to say dramatic is the other answer. The real answer is Ken Burns watched me over 33 years grow from a 21-year-old who graduated from college the day before I started working for him, literally. He watched me grow into an adult. He watched me fall in love, get engaged, get married. He was the first to hold my daughter Allie when she was born. He ran around the mothers and got first dibs, as he said. So Ken has seen an awful lot of the good times of my life, but he also saw a lot of the hard times in my life. It's a very family-oriented company, and he saw me wear my emotions and my experiences, my anxiety, my repetitive thinking nature on my sleeve all the time. And it came to a culmination where I had a breakdown in New York City at a screening. And with his help and his producer, Lynn, got me the help that I needed and started a journey that I did not know I was taking. I have trauma from my childhood. I think most people do in some way, shape, or form. Parents are not perfect, nor am I as a parent. But the whole film came out of the realization that Ken saw in both my brother Chris, who's 10 years younger than me, and myself. He saw that we were a really good match for making this film way before we even knew why we were making it. And it has become a mission. We make a film on the history of jazz. It goes out there, and now people can learn about jazz. My job's done. But this film is so different. We have 23 young people in 2 episodes. They're 2 hours each. It's a lot to ask of someone. The first episode is about the storm of mental illness. The second is about the resilience and the growth that comes out of that storm. These 23 young people gave of themselves so that the viewing audience, however big or small it would turn out to be, could benefit from their stories. They could help people. That was their sole goal in sharing some of the most private moments of their lives, some of the most scary moments of their lives, shame that they feel. But in doing so, it empowered them. It gave them this strength that neither my brother nor I saw coming. So as we started the process of making this film, we realized that this was not just a film, it was a mission. And it was a mission to empower the voice of our young people in this country, ages 11 in our film, age 11 to 27, with a couple adults sprinkled in there, to help spread this message. And plain and simple, you saw 30 minutes of clips. It's not pretty. It's not fun. But it's very, very important that we finally stop and say, what does it look like? What does this illness called mental illness, what does it look like? Where does it possibly come from? How does it feel? And what can you do about it? And we're telling the whole journey, the hard stuff, but also the hopeful and positive stuff. And that is a message that we hope will help transform our thinking and move the needle forward towards a better world and a better country that can think about this and put it at the forefront.
Really is a tremendous mission. Thank you. So you have seen people from all over the country, and the PSA, of course, filmed all around the country, some very beautiful spots. But right here in small, rural Berkshire County, we also have a tremendous challenge in terms of the mental health of all our citizens, but particularly our young children and youth. And I think that's why many of us are here today. I want to ask you, Dr. Butler, as for a long time the only public child and adolescent psychiatrist in Berkshire County for many, many years, what you have seen as the challenges and the needs of children and youth in our community, and what we can all do to help address those challenges, and also how parents and friends can recognize signs of difficulty in kids and reach out to them and connect them to help if possible.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tillman, for inviting me, and thank you for your film, and Allie for all the work you do, and for all the work you do as well in your research. I think I just want to say this film is extraordinary, and anybody who hasn't had an opportunity should see it, because it highlights the complexity of mental health issues in children and youth, and it also highlights many of the challenges. So it covers all bases, and it covers some of our largest challenge that we know of in this community, as well as many other communities around the world, which is access to care. It's been incredibly difficult for years, prior to the pandemic even, and has gotten worse since, for people to be able to access quality care, access care at all, and then try to access quality care. So I think that's our largest challenge. I think it has to do with workforce right now. It has a lot to do with having not enough people doing this work, and it has to do with a lot of structural issues in the systems that are supposed to be providing mental health supports to children and families. So that's our largest challenge. I think, again, the film really captures quite well the complex way in which symptoms in young people emerge. And the causes, I mean, I hate to even sort of use the causes, it's multifactorial and it's individual. Each individual who struggles with mental health symptoms comes to that for a variety of different ways. And it's talked about in the film, genetic and environmental and epigenetic, which means things from generations past are occurring in the ways our genes are expressing themselves, issues around adverse childhood experiences and the impact of multiple, even small, adverse experiences throughout a lifetime, the effects on a developing brain in a child who's struggling with adversity or attachment issues or things like that. So it's very, very complex, which makes Dr. Tillman's second question difficult to answer in some ways and straightforward in others. We sort of know the symptoms that we talk about frequently when it comes to things like depression and anxiety. They manifest very differently in children and adolescents, and they manifest differently in all individuals. So it was referenced a fair amount in some of the 30 minutes that you saw, but you really have to see the whole thing. Issues around feeling sad, feeling anxious, not feeling anything at all, feeling irritable, becoming more angry, not being able to concentrate, sleeping too much, sleeping less, things around functioning, sort of just starting to not be able to function as well, to do as well, to want to do what you used to want to do, to enjoy what you used to enjoy, to want to be around people. People tend to isolate. I think some of the most important things, and there may be some of the more subtle things that came out in some of the statements of the youth, were things like feeling like you don't belong. So a sense of lack of belonging, or feeling like you're a burden, or feeling negative about yourself. So I think for parents, if you start to hear some of those, if you see those things that we know we are looking for, but if you also start to hear some of those kinds of statements around burdensomeness and lack of belonging and not liking themselves, I think those are particularly concerning red flags. And I guess the last thing I want to say that is also referenced in the film is that these disorders start very young and often go unrecognized for years. I see, personally in my professional life, I've seen sort of the chronology of things like anxiety being kind of the starting point. And early on, anxieties tend to manifest as behaviors in kids. It's dysregulated behaviors. It's temper tantrums. It's irritability. It's, trashing the preschool. These are often kids that are feeling overwhelmed with separation anxiety, or as kids get older, with things like social anxiety or perseverative worries. And I think people who live with anxiety for years, having it going unrecognized, tend to be at high risk of starting to feel depressed, because they start to really, in their own minds, think, I don't know how I can continue like this, and they're not going to necessarily tell anybody. So we have to ask, we sometimes have to, as child psychiatrists, put it into words for them, because they have a hard time trying to find the words for themselves. So I think recognizing anxiety early is very important. And again, I think if you start to hear some of those sort of end of the road statements, and statements about not wanting to live, about death, but statements about feeling like a burden and that they don't belong and that people would be better off without them, those are particularly concerning statements.
I think the power, too, in this film is, I think we don't give enough credit for the power of feeling heard and feeling seen. And I think Hiding in Plain Sight does a beautiful job of verbalizing that and throughout the entire thing, I'm just over here nodding profusely at what everyone's saying, because I may not have been able to say it so eloquently, but God, that is how I feel some days. And a pain shared is a pain halved. So to hear that someone else has gone through that, and the true, like, deep power of knowing that you're not alone is a game changer.
I was at an event about 2 weeks ago in Oregon, and I was told that there was a young person who was going to be at, was at a college, would be at the event. He would be sitting in the back with his therapist because they were afraid that the clip reel would trigger him. And he had expressed suicide ideation, was considering dropping out of school. And I said, of course, I totally understand. At the end of the Q&A after the clip, I see this young man come running down the stairs, and he just grin as big as you can imagine. And he just gave me a hug. And he said, thank you, thank you, thank you. This spoke to me in a way I haven't heard. I'm going to go back to my room and get the whole thing on Amazon Prime and your local PBS station. He didn't say that part. But what blows my mind is what you just said. That was the young man that might be triggered. He was exuberant. And that is the number one thing. I'm jumping ahead, but the number one thing that we learned from this film is empowering people who are struggling with mental health. If they get that empowerment, if they can realize it, then they own something, and it doesn't become them anymore. It's not them. It's something outside of them, and practice what you preach. I talk about my mental health struggles now. I'm an open book. I'll bore you guys for hours if you'd like, because I don't feel like it defines me anymore. So I'm sorry, you just touched a raw nerve there in a very good way.
I want to,
I want to hear about your work, because I think it's so important, and also what you mentioned, Allie, about feeling alone with this. I mean, and the film brings that up as well. Kids will tend to feel like nobody else has ever felt this way. And just knowing that other people have experienced these things gives them some hope, which is so important in recovery. So
and I think that takes us to Dr. Lewis's
good segue.
research, which has focused in the last few years, particularly on the issue of loneliness, which is its own epidemic. And even before the pandemic, in the United Kingdom, the government created a position of the Minister of Loneliness, recognizing how pervasive this was and how painful and erosive to mental health it is. So I wanted to ask you what you're learning about loneliness and how we might think of recognizing that and addressing that, not only as individuals and families, but in our communities.
I appreciate that, and it's such an honor to be here with the other panelists and with all of you today. I was thinking a lot. The research that we've done so far on loneliness has really been focused on the impact of social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact that might have had on people who have had longstanding difficulties in feeling connected, in the way that we're talking about, and feeling sort of seen and present in relationships. Some of what we've learned is that it was really, there was something about the loss of in-person social contact opportunities that really seemed to drive both short-term increases in loneliness and in suicidal ideation in people, particularly during the first 6 to 8 months of the pandemic. So people might have adapted, sort of found ways of connecting with others via Zoom or, through texting. We hear a lot about that in the film. But really, it was more the loss of this in-person social contact, which might have just been something as simple as, being able to go to your local coffee shop and pick up a coffee, the sort of mundane daily social contact. Where losing that really seemed to drive both increases in loneliness and in suicidal ideation. There's something else, though, Jane, really quickly that sort of came to mind, as I was listening to everyone else talk, which, another branch of the research that we do is on the idea of psychic pain or psychological pain, emotional suffering, which sounds like a very sort of abstract idea, but, really the way that we think about it and the way that we assess it is we think of it as sort of being one step farther than depression, one step farther than anxiety, the sort of negative feeling that, might have sort of physical pain sensations going along with it, but really leaves someone with a sense of this negative emotional state being unending and being unbearable, just being something that you cannot sit with, and where you can't see an end in sight. And we know from the research literature that this is a really important risk factor for suicidal thinking. It's also something, just in our experience of researching it, that we find that people don't have the language for, particularly when they're in the throes of it. It's very hard to find words to put to this kind of emotional state. The sort of, normal emotion labels like sadness or even, anxiety or despair, it just doesn't capture the really toxic, poignant feeling of it. And because it's difficult to put into language, it's hard to find ways of expressing it in a way that invite other people into that experience, where you can find this sort of shared territory and sense of connection. In part, this is what we try to do in therapy. If you're in therapy and you have someone that you trust, any sort of relationship with an adult that you might trust as a young person in particular, helping to sort of find the words for it, to begin expressing it, can be just an absolute game changer. And I think that's probably what Eric was seeing in the film as people were sort of sharing their experience and finding a sense of community and connection. What we've also learned about psychic pain, and then I'll stop, is that one of the ways that people, just sort of anecdotally in my experience working with research subjects who have long histories of suicidal thinking, one of the ways they sort of find their way through it is by finding ways to not only express what they're feeling, but to find a way to share it with others in a way that feels like it's helping and making a difference. And this gives a sense of meaning to the pain. Not to sort of gloss over it, it's still, a really terrible experience, but there's a purpose to it that can be used to help others and used to sort of contribute back to the world. So the sense of meaning in difficult experiences becomes just absolutely essential. This is, again, where I think the different perspectives on this panel are just very helpful in highlighting that, and I thought the film also did a wonderful job of sort of highlighting that, how that's important.
We could talk for much longer, but we can't because it's about to be 4:30. But you're welcome. I think we'll be in the lobby and can have further discussion there. There's some resources in the lobby. I want to thank Allie for traveling the furthest, and for the Find Your Anchor boxes. Thank you, and for sharing your story, and Eric for the film that's tremendous, and Brenda for your expertise and being on the ground here in Berkshire County trying to help our kids and youth, and Katie for your research, and to all of you for being interested in coming out on Sunday afternoon. Thank you, Kelly Victory and Biff. Thank you, Berkshire Coalition. And we'll see you in the lobby.